Um, so moving forward, this is end for the question answers for chapter 1. We are moving on to chapter 2, which is being presented by Dr. Khadija Siddiq herself. Khadija, please go ahead. It's over to you now.
Thank you, sir. I'm gonna share my presentation.
You will have to unmute yourself once again.
Sir, is the screen sharing or not?
Yes, it is.
And is my presentation visible?
We have chapter 2, the operational dynamics of political parties in Pakistan.
I don't know what's wrong with this. I started this. Okay, is it visible now?
It is.
Okay. So Assalamu alaikum everyone. Just okay. So my name is Dr. Khadija Siddiq, and I have been talking for some time now, so you must all be knowing my voice. So basically, my chapter, which I am going to present from this book, is the chapter number 2, the operational dynamics of political parties in Pakistan. The members of my group, Kamran and Namira, have already presented chapter 1, and they have already developed a ground on which I am going to explain the operational dynamics of political parties in Pakistan. So, first of all, I would like to mention a few words about the chapter and its author, so that you would be knowing that who created this chapter and what was his thought process and what is going to be discussed in this chapter. So basically, this chapter was created by Muhammad Wasim, a professor of political science at the Department of Social Sciences, Lahore University of Management Sciences. Being a professional of political science, he has opted to write on the political parties, their dynamics, their importance, and other projections of political parties. Moreover, he has the interest in the ethnic, Islamic, constitutional, electoral, and sectarian politics in Pakistan. So this introduction pretty much suits with the chapter which I have read, and moreover, the chapter would, as we would go along this presentation, the chapter would seek to understand the role of political parties as an expression of the current pattern of conflict in Pakistan. So basically, this chapter is not going to discuss a generic role of political parties, because we all live in Pakistan and this is a daily life thing in our lives. We all come across various aspects of political parties in Pakistan, but in this chapter Muhammad Wasim has he has critically analyzed the political parties. This chapter is not very much long, because this chapter has a lot of repetitions from the previous one, so I made a pretty small presentation, just focusing on the things that are important to memorize and how the political parties work. Okay. Moreover, the chapter would outline the profile of political parties, encompassing issues and policies and their mode of expression, from legislative debates to aggressive political participation, such as mob violence and target killings and others. Similarly, it also deals with the various parties that matter in the perpetual power game on the top. So these are the things, a few words about the author, and then what we are going to discuss in this chapter. Okay, so basically Muhammad Wasim, as a professor of political science, before analyzing the political parties of Pakistan, he first made a ground that why political parties are important and what are their uses. So basically, political parties are the political tools and mediums via which political socialization occur and political culture move forward in a society. In this one brief introduction of this thing, I have used the words political tools, mediums, political socialization, and political. Can you hear me? Like, I have a voice issue here. So can you hear me?
Yes, we can. We have muted everybody's mic. That's why you can't hear anybody.
No, actually, I am having the connection issue, actually saying, okay, anyways. So basically, yeah. Sorry for the interruption. Okay. So basically here I have used these terminologies. Anyone who has a knowledge of political science itself, or who has read about political parties, he or she would definitely know that political socialization is a process. It is a slow and steady and a continuous process via which you, me, and everyone sitting here have started knowing about the political system and political parties. So basically, political socialization, it is starts when you are a small child. It is a process by which you start listening to various stuff by your family, by your school, college, institution, then jobs, and other various any source of knowledge that shapes your political ideologies is a process of is included in political socialization. And political socialization is a way by which we make this thing happen. Political culture comes into being. um, and then political parties play a very important role in all of this process, because at every point of time, either you are influenced by your family, your friends, job, or whatever, but the political parties, they have a influence over large number of people of various ages, various families, ethnicities, religions, and all. So basically, political parties plays a major important role in shaping the political horizons of any country. I think I have established the role of political parties here. Coming towards the political parties in Pakistan, as we all know, Pakistan has a multi-party system. Political parties shapes public opinion and are the drivers of democracy. This thing has been mentioned by Muhammad Wasim in his chapter, and a number of other authors of various works on political science, that political parties are extremely important for the working and the progress of democracy. Similarly, political parties educate and create awareness among people of any nation, I would say, because this political parties via a number of ways, by addressing the locals directly, or by the help of their MNAs or MPAs if they come in the government, a lot of other ways, they can actually play a very important role in educating people. However, unfortunately, as it has been mentioned by Muhammad Wasim, and we all know that political parties in Pakistan are mostly designed on the sectarian and religious lines. Talking about the sectarian lines, it has been mentioned in Muhammad Wasim's book that Pakistan People's Party, in one point of time, like in the early years of its inception, and even during the years of Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto, they were actually promoting the sectarian lines very openly. Similarly, MQM, a very famous party in Karachi and the Sindh region, has always worked on these sectarian lines. For example, the Muhajir movement and the separation of Karachi and all, they all were on the sectarian lines. Talking about the religious lines, uh, if we see various parties like Jamaat-e-Islami and a number of others, I cannot really recall, they were written in the book, that they were formed on the religious grounds. They were based on the religious lines and ideologies, and their major manifesto was promoting religion in the country and starting the Sharia law and all other such aspects of religion. Moreover, this is the line from one of my very favorite lines from the book Pakistan at the Crossroads. Political parties provide road signs on the way to under the inner dynamics of the system. As I have already mentioned here, that political parties shape the stature of a nation or a country. So basically, if we start from 1947 or even before that, it was one political party, Pakistan Muslim League, who actually worked in various aspects, in various ways, in different auras, to attain a country in which we live today. Moving forward, Pakistan Muslim League and was divided into a number of factions, and in the all over the history, like 72 years of Pakistan, political parties have always played a very important role, and they have designed the dynamics of the system. For example, any one of you who must have even not read any source can actually define the inner dynamics of the system by claiming that this political party is directed towards this stance, and that one towards that, and stuff like that. So basically, in a multiple party system, the political parties, because they have influence over a large number of community, they actually define the dynamics of the system. And that is why in the previous presentation, when I was answering a question, I said that it was actually the political parties who promoted, it was actually the so-called leaders who promoted the military rule in Pakistan. Okay. So moving forward, the organizational dynamics of political parties in Pakistan. As I have already mentioned that sectarianism exists in Pakistan, religious lines are one thing on which the political parties are based, and there are a number of different dynamics on which the parties are actually based. However, some parties like JUI and MQM are small and they are highly organized. Now, there's a difference which we need to notice. The parties which are smaller, like JUI and MQM, they are highly organized. This has been mentioned by Mohammad Wasim, and being a resident of Karachi, I have seen how organized and how systematic MQM was. It was not easy for MQM to rule such a big city, just which has never been even governed properly by the government. MQM literally ruled it. It was the what do you call it in the political science language? It was the sovereign de facto, I think, or sovereign, yeah, of the city. So basically, why was it possible? It was possible because it was small, but it was highly organized. The MQM, the top brass of MQM used to have very direct contacts with the local workers. And this thing has actually made JUI and MQM both very organized and effective. However, coming towards the other political parties, the mainstream parties, or about which we say that they are the leading parties in the current politics of Pakistan. However, when this book was written, like in 2013, 14, 15, in such era, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf was not in the governance, but even today, like analyzing the scenario in 2020, these three political parties are on the political horizon of Pakistan. They have a lax organizational structure categorized by a gap of communication between leaders and workers, absence of meaningful party elections, and a low level of party discipline. So basically, the organizational dynamics of these parties revolve around this because they are the national parties. They apparently call themselves the national parties. They have workers, MNAs, MPAs, volunteers all over Pakistan. But unfortunately, even the top brass of these political parties are not in direct contact with the locals. Moreover, there's a thing that they are so vast and they have worked on various aspects, and all of their party workers are not well aware of their party manifesto. So basically, the parties are just used by the top brass, which is actually not always, loyal to the parties. For example, in the current scenario, in 2018 and 2019, there was a huge argument. There was a big argument on this, that Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf has actually given the ministries to those who were not in the struggle of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. So basically, this is the organizational dynamics of the large political parties in Pakistan. Similarly goes with Pakistan People's Party and Pakistan Muslim League Noon. Okay. So basically, this sentence in black, this has also been taken by these are actually the words of Mohammad Wasim, that there seems to be a poor fix between the organizational input and the electoral output of political parties in Pakistan. Means that they actually do something else, they plan something else, there is an input of something else, but after the electoral output, the stature or the contour of the political party changes. That is what we have actually witnessed in the political campaign and then the governance of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. Okay, so now this case study of the peace talk with the Taliban in 2009 clearly would show you that how the political parties in Pakistan are divided in their ideologies and how do they take decisions. And it's very sad that take the decisions which are very narrow, with very narrow ideologies, just for the time being. They do not really plan for the future. So basically, I would like to talk about the peace talk first. I would like to talk about the peace talk first. That most of you would be knowing that in 2009, the political parties in Pakistan, or the governance of the People's Party, actually decided to hold a peace talks with the Taliban and the infidels, or those who were what do you call them, like militants in the Fata region, or in the northern areas of Pakistan. So basically, this thing was actually put it in on the floor by Jamaat-e-Islami, because they wanted peace with Taliban as a matter of their manifesto. So now basically, the thing which is pretty disturbing here, and I would like to mention, is that the Jamaat-e-Islami mentions itself, or portrays itself as an Islamic party. And now, being an Islamic party, it was actually promoting or trying to save the Taliban, who were actually responsible for humongous crimes, war crimes, terrorism, extremism, and whatnot. So basically, at this point of time, one thing which was actually disturbing on the horizons of Pakistan, and which was badly highlighted and sabotaged the vision of Pakistan, image of Pakistan worldwide, was that a party which is made on the religious lines was actually trying to convince the government to make a peace deal with the Taliban. Now let's see what happens. The relatively secular ANP government in Peshawar felt helpless in the face of advancing march of the Taliban into large areas. And then what happened was actually that eventually, after JUI, the other parties, including ANP, People's Party, Pakistan Muslim League, Noon, and all of the others, for various reasons, the ANP, for example, was not able to govern the areas in a proper way, so they decided to make a peace talk, because they were actually trying to, what would you say? Like, they were actually trying to divert the attention, maybe, of people from their lack of governance or their failure of governance in their province and in their area. So they decided to, hold a peace talk with those terrorists. People's Party actually also voted for it, although People's Party was in the government at that time, but they also voted for this just because they did not want to, made the clergy of Pakistan against them. And similarly, the other parties, the political parties, they voted for this peace talk, but they had different ideologies, and their process was very narrow. They did not even plan for the next 5 years to come. And this was the reason, this was one major reason, that eventually in 2014, the attacks on APS Peshawar took place. The attacks on a number of important places in Pakistan took place. Because this peace talk actually gave a message to the entire world that Pakistan is not ready to fight against the terrorists. And then the terrorists actually had this, they got this message, indirect message, that they have supporters in the political system of Pakistan. So this thing actually sabotaged the Pakistan political horizons very badly. And this was one thing after which the military again, came in the picture with a stronger stature. Because in 2008, when Musharraf went back to his home and the 18th Amendment was on its way, the military was on a back footing. But this one major thing actually, changed the scenario, and it actually started promoting the army just the way it was before 2008, or even in 1990s. So this case study of the Taliban peace talk is one important thing which I think everyone should keep there in mind, to know that how the political parties work. Similarly, Pakistan Muslim League Noon and the other political parties similarly tried to save their skin from criticism of Islamic and anti-American groups. So now basically the thing is that the clergy, the political parties in Pakistan was influenced by the clergy in Pakistan. Okay, so now basically, now I have developed the ground that why military, again, one major thing, that was only one thing by which the military again came into the, front place. So now basically the model which is working in Pakistan, these are exactly the words of Mohammad Wasim, which I have, written here, that the phenomena of a weak civilian government operating under the vigilance of the army characterized the post-Musharraf period of civilization after 2008, largely following the Brazilian model. So basically, this Brazilian model, or what we call as the Praetorian democracy, is what we are facing today. Like, we are the actual example, living example of these terminologies right now. Our army chief meets with all the other ambassadors. Our army chief and our top brass of the army is actually doing a lot of work in the political horizons, in the economy of Pakistan, and on various other aspects. I cannot really recall the source, but I have read it during my preparation that almost 46 to 47% economy of Pakistan is in the hands, directly or indirectly, with the army. So what is that? That is actually, we have our political parties and our nation, so-called nation, has given ways, either direct ways or indirect ways, to the army to inculcate itself in the political, economical, administrative, governance, every horizon of Pakistan. We actually now, we have army institutions, we have schools, colleges, engineering universities, medical universities, hospitals, shopping malls, in industries, and you name it, and army is everywhere. These two resources have been mentioned in this book, but their issue is, they have been mentioned, but they were, the facts and figures used were of 2014 and 2015, I guess. So I have just, updated the figures here of 2019 and this other German watchdog. So we basically, Freedom House in 2019 has classified Pakistan as a party-free country. This is such an alarming situation for Pakistan that they have actually, in comparison with India, where there is citizen amendmentship and a lot of other various restrictions by the government, they have been classified as a free country, because whatever there is happening by the will of a democratic government. There is no difference between a sovereign de jure and a sovereign de facto. But in Pakistan currently, we have two different sovereigns. One is a sovereign in the front line. It is just by name a sovereign, which we call as sovereign de jure. I think, I am not really sure of the, like, if I am, sorry if I am, confusing these two terms, but I will confirm and mention it afterwards. And then we are just a hardline autocratic government of 2019. Anyways, moving forward, Muhammad Wasim has also mentioned the stature of the individual three major political parties. Although Muhammad Wasim has mentioned almost all the political parties, but nothing much, striking knowledge was mentioned. So I chose these three political parties to critically analyze here. So the Pakistan Political Party was in September 1976. It is a left-wing socialist party. If we see at the history of Pakistan People's Party, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was a very modern man who himself was into a lot of stuff which are now banned in Pakistan. So basically, and he himself openly used to accept it in his political gatherings. So from that scenario, we have, and then after the Zulfikar Ali Bhutto came into the power, he himself implemented a number of nationalist and socialist statures in Pakistan. So basically, it's a left-wing socialist party. Founder was Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, who was executed by the military government of Ziaul Haq, currently ruling the Sindh province, and the chairperson is Bilawal Bhutto Zardari. Its one leader, Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto, was assassinated. So basically, Pakistan People's Party has two major contributions in the politics of Pakistan in the current scenario. One, no doubt, is 18th Amendment. It's one of the major achievements of the government of People's Party, keeping in mind that when the 18th Amendment was passed by the National Assembly, Pakistan People's Party was not having a two-third majority. So basically, the credit, as Kamran has already mentioned, about Asif Ali Zardari, that he's a true someone who actually played a very important part, and Pakistan People's Party, while also not being assembly with two-third majority, it was able to convince various political parties to get the 18th Amendment passed. Moreover, in a series of political moves, the 9th National Finance Commission Award, the Gilgit-Baltistan Order, and the Balochistan Initiative, Zardari changed the political landscape in a longer-term perspective. So basically, Pakistan political party, Pakistan People's Party, since 2008, has this sort of a stature that they came into power from 2008 to 2013, and they ensured the smooth transition of democracy. Somewhere, someone asked a question in the previous question answer session that 2013 election was rigged. So basically, I would like to post a report of Pakistan's institutions about the elections, various elections, and then you will have your answer that which election was the mostly rigged the most, and how the 2013 election was far more not rigged as compared to the elections of 2018. Sorry for bringing this up right in the middle of the presentation. Anyways, we have the Pakistan Muslim League Noon here. Pakistan Muslim League Noon, or N, that formed the government after 2013 election, is a legatee of All India Muslim League in British India. Pakistan Muslim League has a long history. It has come into power twice, and once the government was toppled by a president, and the next time it was toppled by Musharraf. After Zia died in an air crash in August 1988, there emerged two rival factions of ruling Muslim League. The King's Party, which was actually led by the ex-Prime Minister Muhammad Khan Banejo and Punjab Chief Minister Nawaz Sharif. So basically, here I would like to mention one thing regarding the previous chapter here, that Nawaz Sharif's party came into being after Zia, and Nawaz Sharif was a politician who was staunchly supported by Zia. So we can actually highlight one thing here, that a number of politicians in Pakistan, which now on the face promote democracy just a bit too much, they were actually promoted by the military dictators themselves. Moreover, Pakistan Muslim League Noon is a mirror image of Pakistan People's Party in terms of dynastic leadership. As I've already mentioned, that they have been mistreated at the hands of the army and the civilian presidents, both. Now coming towards the last political party of Pakistan, Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, Imran Khan's Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf was virtually a one-man party for 15 years until 2011. This is exactly the thing which I mentioned while answering the question answers, that Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf was not by the question answers, while in this presentation, that the top brass is always different in these parties from the lower political workers. They actually do not promote their lower leadership, the young leadership. Like actually Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf in its manifesto said it, that we will promote the young leadership. But now in standing in the midst of 2020, we do not really see that happening. So that's exactly how it worked for Imran Khan. It was virtually a one-man party for 15 years, but after 2011, when Imran Khan was so eager to have the seat of the Prime Minister, he started using the various politicians for his own good. None of the mainstream political leaders acknowledged its role as a significant political actor, not South alliance with it. This is exactly what happens when Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf came into being in the initial years. It was not a celebrated political party initially. Imran was generally dismissed as a product of intelligence agencies and as a creation of the media. Because of his disturbed past, we can say that, because of his marriages and other stuff, he was actually not liked by the political parties and the political culture of Pakistan. But all this did not render him irrelevant for political party politics in Pakistan, because he gave public expression to the deep concerns of large number of people from the educated middle class. This is exactly Mohammad Wasim has said, and this is exactly which we have witnessed in 2018, that although Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf was strongly backed by the military establishment, but we should give this credit of to Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf that it actually caused mass mobilization and turnout of people in the elections of 2013 and 2018 both. And that is how Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf actually, played a very important role in making the educated people, especially of Pakistan, well aware of the various political parties, their statutes, manifestos, and they actually make them interested in the voting and democracy of Pakistan. PTI has usually been accused of being a pro-military party and a propagator of Praetorian democracy in Pakistan. I think I have said enough about this pro-military, about Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf being a pro-military party and a propagator of Praetorian democracy. So this is all from my side. I think I have done justice to this chapter. Thank you so much, and I would like to take any questions.
Thank you so much for Khadija for such a wonderful presentation. Wonderful, I must say. Some of the very interesting points. One thing I would like to mention before we go on to the questions. I keep saying that when you have these references in a book, this does not mean that you stick to those references only. For example, this book was published in 2016. What Khadija has done is that some of the references in the book were from 2013 and 14. She did not stick to that only, and she updated those references, went on to research the same. For example, that German Watchdog and the Freedom House published that survey, and then she updated the figures according to the current data. This is something very important. This is something which we keep doing in ERC also, the Essay Resource Center, where we try to provide you the latest statistics related to the essay writing and all these things. So this is one thing. Very often when I see some references in the essays which are old, people tell us that this is something which was written in the book. It's not like that. For example, she has mentioned that the PTI was successful in mobilizing large number of people during the elections of 2013 and 2018. Now, 2018 election is not mentioned in this book, but since for the author of this article, it was an important statistics, she updated that. So learn this thing, that you have to update your data, not only what is mentioned in the book, but update it according to the requirement. Okay, so we had a question right from the beginning, since while you were presenting, Khadija. Is our judiciary too under control of military, just like political parties? Hamad asked this question. Is our judiciary also under the control of military, just like political parties? Would you like to answer this question, please?
Yeah, actually, I wonder if people here have listened to the word judicial activism. Our judiciary is, I don't really say that currently is under control of army, because I do not have statistics for it. When I said that Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is a pro-military government, that I have statistics. But about judiciary, I do not have statistics and research about it. But the judiciary of Pakistan is in a huge wave, in a long and prolonged wave of judicial activism that has actually sabotaged the democracy of Pakistan very badly. Because judicial activism actually, a few days back, Adan Fatma, I don't know if she is online or not, she asked me that what is juristic democracy? That is actually mentioned in chapter number 3, so I won't go into much detail because that comes in their jurisdiction. But Pakistan is actually facing juristocracy. In aristocracy, aapko, if someone of you is from political science background or any of person, you must know that taxes is something which completely comes under the jurisdiction of parliament. So how come your chief justice can take a suo motu action on saying that aap taxes nahi laga sakte? You know you can't do that. Then you become the prime minister and start controlling the country, man. You can't do that, because there needs to be a separation of power is extremely important in the democracy.
So
So
the term
one
we
more
use for
example
this
I
is
would, sorry,
jurisdocracy.
no, नहीं,
Juristocracy.
exactly, juristocracy, juristic democracy कह सकते हैं, judicial activism and suo motu actions. A number of terms are used for this. So even the juristocracy is a term which is not usually used in the chapter number 3. It is also being used by some author, and it is given as a reference. So I think those who would deal with chapter number 3 would, give you a detailed answer for this.
Okay, so there is another very good question, that if Pakistan is observed as a Praetorian state, so how can we become a more functional bourgeois state with deeper democratic foundations in the trenches of civil society, educational institutions, and media? How is it possible to become a more functional bourgeois
Actually,
society?
I think this is the same question which was asked previously, and I answered it, that how are we going to, decrease the role of military? Then again, I would like to answer here that this is not something जो एक साथ हो जाएगा या एक time पे हो जाएगा. Literally, it took years and decades for these ये जो सियासतदान है, इनको ये समझने में इतना वक्त लग गया कि हमने इन फ्रंट मिलिट्री को खेलने नहीं देना since 2008, right?
Okay.
नवाज शरीफ जब इमरान खान नवाज शरीफ के खिलाफ धरने दे के उसने धरने दिए 2014 में, सबको लग रहा था कि आज नहीं तो कल मार्शल लॉ वापस आ जाएगा. बट ये सिर्फ एक जगह से नहीं होगा, ये हर इंस्टीट्यूशन में ये चीज होगी, और इट विल टेक इयर्स, बिकॉज पाकिस्तान इज अ वेरी यंग स्टेट. अगर हम स्टेट्स की नेशन में बात करना शुरू करें, आज हम लोग यूके और यूएसए की डेमोक्रेसी की एग्जांपल्स दे रहे होते हैं, लेकिन ये हिस्ट्री है 200-300 सालों की, और उससे पहले भी जो नेशंस थी उनकी एक प्रॉपर फाइट थी, एक सिविल वॉर थी. इवन टॉकिंग अबाउट फ्रांस, आज उनका 16th कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन है और 5th रिपब्लिक है. So expecting this in very near future is, I don't really think so, is something intelligent to think about. But obviously, thought process की changing बहुत important है, and then governance and policies and the change in the political parties.
Our next question is also related to the same thing. I'll take just this question, that if we consider that most of these rulers in Pakistan, democratic rulers in Pakistan, have also been a product of the military institutions or military dominance, how can democracy prevail in true sense in such situation? Ghulam Abbas is asking this. How can democracy prevail in true sense in a situation like this?
So that's exactly what I have said, right? That even not only about Nawaz Sharif, MQM was a product of army, right? आप खुद सोचें कि इतने साल तक मुशर्रफ रहा एक मिलिट्री डिक्टेटर, वो एमक्यूएम के खिलाफ कुछ नहीं किया उसने, और नवाज शरीफ ने आके 6 महीने में पाकिस्तान वहां मतलब उसको कर दिया. सो बेसिकली डेमोक्रेसी इज अ वेरी परप्लेक्सिंग टर्म. हर मुल्क में डेमोक्रेसी मुख्तलिफ है, हर डेमोक्रेसी की कोई एक डेफिनेशन नहीं है, और डेमोक्रेसी के मॉडल्स भी बहुत ज्यादा हैं. कुछ इसको कंसेंशुअल डेमोक्रेसी कहते हैं, कुछ वेस्टमिनिस्टर डेमोक्रेसी के कहते हैं, लेकिन पॉलिटिकल कल्चर जो होता है वो हमेशा आपकी डेमोक्रेसी को डिफाइन करता है. तो पाकिस्तान में डेमोक्रेसी तब तक ऐसे ही चलती रहेगी जब तक सियासतदान अपने बलबूते पे सामने नहीं आएंगे, और जब तक आर्मी सियासतदानों को घर में क्रिएट करके मुल्क के उस पर नहीं भेजेगी. फॉर एग्जाम्पल नवाज शरीफ लिविंग एग्जाम्पल ऑफ दिस. खुद वो ज़ियाउल हक के कंधों पे चढ़ के आया था, और आज जब इमरान खान एस्टेब्लिशमेंट के कंधों पे चढ़ के खड़ा हुआ है तो उसी को ज्यादा मसला है कि भाई ये तो सिलेक्टेड प्राइम मिनिस्टर है. तो that's what he did once, और अब वही हो रहा है.
Okay, Muhammad Arshad, I think your question about ways politics are independent without any military interference, it was also connected with the previous question, और उसका जवाब जो है वो हमने already दे लिया. All right, thank you very much. It has been a wonderful first session for chapter 1 and 2. Wonderful presentation by the cluster leader, Dr. Khadija, Namira, and Kamran Shah. I really enjoyed the whole thing. We're going to have a very short break right now, maximum 5 to 7 minutes. All of you know not to log out because the slots are filling fast. You may not be able to log in again. Okay, so stay there. 12:01, and I'll be back by 12:06. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.